Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted on Sunday the 24th of November. I'm Katherine Bennett.
And I'm Mark Lambert.
Sunday the 24th of November, Mark, Christ the King, instituted by Pius XI in 1925 to respond to growing secularism and atheism. Really important end of the liturgical year to remember that while governments come and go, Christ's reign is forever. And it's also we've had tagged on to this is World Youth Sunday, which was celebrated or rather funds were raised for world youth across the UK. Did you have mention of that in your parish?
Yeah, we had a talk about it. It's a wonderful feast day, Christ the King, isn't it? And
yeah,
it always reminds me of that, Stat Crux Dom Volvita Orbis, the motto of the Carthusians. The cross stands while the world revolves, and as you say, it was literally set up as a sort of pushback against secularism. So I think that in itself is a really important thing. But all my life, I don't know, I'm sure it's the same everywhere, but I know you didn't have anything in your parish. It's been Youth Sunday. That's YOOF.
Yeah.
Or youth.
Youth Sunday, everyone.
So I was a youth once upon a time back in the day, and what always amazes me about the youth service, we have a diocesan youth service, and that is it receives more funding than I think any other department, if you like, in the diocese, and it also produces virtually no results whatsoever, which just always cracks me up. And that might sound like an arbitrary sort of comment, an anecdotal observation, but talking to teachers and chaplains and stuff like that, everyone's of the same opinion, unfortunately. And it's what I love. I love that our bishop has decided how important to give it prominence in terms of funding, that the youth service is important. But it matters what we do, doesn't it, really? I would have thought it was the most important thing. And what strikes me about the whole situation is the way that it's not changed, Katherine. I don't know what your experience is since so it hasn't changed in, 40 years. It's exactly the same liturgy, exactly the same hymns, and, they're doing the same things, because obviously I've had children go for it now. And I think the take up dwindles, but what you really see in terms of results is the fact that there are very few young people coming to mass, and I think it's so sad and so ironic, and our inability to see what's going on here. But it's very indicative of the papacy of Pope Francis in terms, it seems to me. So this was my reflection today, was that more than ever now, I think, we need this bold declaration, Viva Cristo Rei, that we need to proclaim Christ, the universal kingship of Christ, as an antidote for secularism. And the world is calling out for an antidote to secularism. But the church, look at the church under Pope Francis, it seems to be afraid of the positions that it's held historically, as if they weren't revealed by God as truth for man to conform himself to. It's like, for some reason now in this time, we've decided that we're uncomfortable about those realities. And what we're going to try and do is either mainly ignore them. What we're mainly going to do, ignore them. And it feels like the devil can sniff that this is what's going on. And so he's pushing these things forward, these big questions. And we are failing to address them on every single level, it seems to me. And what that results in is a situation where those big questions gain ground consistently. And the brave souls who have put themselves forward publicly, people like Jason Everett for marriage and family life, for example, are left high and dry by a Vatican that stopped talking about these things. And where's the Pope on the euthanasia bill that's been dragging through in the British Parliament for the last month or so, and we're looking at the vote next week, aren't we?
Yes, good
Where's
question.
the
Has he
Vatican?
commented?
No, I haven't heard.
No, I haven't.
Like, where is the papal, consistory for life? Where's the comment? Where's the pushback? And not only, if we lose this vote, it will be enormous in this country for life, for what the church stands for, really. But if we win, then I think bishops, what we really need is to proclaim that victory, that people have seen, that the truth is that human beings have got infinite dignity, and we need to keep pushing with the teaching. This is can you see what I'm saying, Katherine? That these are the issues, and you see the way the devil is pushing it forward. We've got confrontations that are absolutely cataclysmic. If these things come through, it will change the whole way that society thinks about life and the importance of and dignity of human beings. And we've not said very much about it. Thank God our bishops have stood up in the last couple of weeks, and one by one they've been making really solid statements. But we need to be engaging with the people. I feel like our bishops really do need to engage with the people who really understand this in a theological sense, who understand the arguments, and that might be looking at the Society for the Protection of the Unborn Child or Right to Life, getting in touch with these organisations, finding the right experts who are able to explain these arguments clearly to secular society. And we really should be on a run to push these things forward as far as we possibly can. And obviously the same thing, we've had a massive problem with the ideology, the sexual ideology that's been pushed forward. And where do we see answers from the church? What we've seen from Pope Francis with Fiducia Supplicans and, the promotion of Father James Martin. He's just recently appointed a new papal preacher who's got a dreadful history of pushing this ideology forward. So as a church that holds revelation in perpetuity until Jesus comes again, that's the Pope's job, is to hold that deposit of faith that ended with the death of the last apostle, and he's to hold that secure until Jesus comes again. And I totally understand that we want to be as compassionate as possible. So let's put that in the context of that. I think we've done a terrible job as a church of explaining that people who are in terrible positions, of sinful positions, who are struggling with their lives and with situations in their lives, they need to be at church. They need to be coming to Mass. They need to be they need to be going to penance. They need to be kneeling before the Blessed Sacrament. They need to abstain from Holy Communion because, if they're in a state of mortal sin, that will make things worse. But they need to be engaging with our Lord, as we all do, because we're all sinners. And we all need to kneel before our Lord and say, Lord, I'm struggling with this. Help me to understand. Help me to find a way forward. Help me to conform my life to you. And just to put that in the temporal context of the last couple of weeks for us, we were at Catholic Man UK. Was it last weekend?
Yeah.
Time flies by, doesn't it? And there were all 40 men, and a lot of them, the youngest was 17. And all these guys were totally sure of what they were doing, totally faithful to the gospel, living Catholic lives, committed to their families, absolutely committed to growing in virtue and finding out ways to grow in virtue. This is what is attractive. What the church teaches is attractive, not what the church is doing in terms of moving towards the culture and saying, hey, look, kids, we're fun too. Come on a youth retreat and go on a zip line. And, we won't talk to you about any of that nasty God stuff. And the result is that the kids don't know. And in my parish, we've got loads of young boys who come and serve at the extraordinary form of the Mass. We've got loads of altar servers who serve at the 11:30 Mass, the main Mass, every Sunday. And there are only boy altar servers at that mass. And they do that because they're attracted to our parish priest preaching the gospel, to the beauty of the liturgy, because they know there's something different going on. We don't need to change anything. All we need to do is set the truth free. And it just frustrates me that we seem to have lost that, don't we? Do you not think? And we seem to be determined to obfuscate it and instead to push in an opposite direction. And we've got a group of people who seem to be desperate to push the church towards the secular ideology. It's interesting that takes place on a Sunday when you've got the whole point of this Sunday is to stand up against the secularization in the culture.
It's true that we have individuals who consciously and knowingly try to draw people away from Christ. Many don't intend to do that, but do, because what we also have is a malevolent force that has for centuries been doing exactly that. So we can pick at individual bits and we can say there's problems in the schools, there's problems with lack of devotion at home, there's problems with the liturgy, but all of that is part of a vast malevolent force that is trying to have this kind of false Messiah. So basically that's why Christ the King is so important. We say, no, Christ is King. Christ is King. Because wherever we see communism or other things like that, it's this establishment of this false utopianism, this trying to bring about some desired end outside of Christ. And there is a problem with not actively preaching Christ, as you've said. There's a problem, but there's also a problem with passively hiding the face of Christ, which is why I think the Pope's comments in Indonesia were problematic, because whilst he's not actively saying boo, down with Jesus, he might have his flaws, but he's not that bad. But it's not enough. We have to actively show people the face of Christ, because wherever we hide Christ from people, we are allowing these other things to creep in, as they do in schools and as they do in workplaces and as they do through politics and in government. And if we don't stand firm and say, no, Christ is the answer, and be unafraid about that, out of some kind of misguided sense of compassion or charity or kindness or niceness, then actually we totally and utterly fail people and we let them die. We let them die. There is nothing nice about watching people walk towards their death and doing nothing about it. So Christ the King is absolutely, essential to remember that focus has to be primarily on Christ. And as you say, with the youth, like you said, for 40 years, for me too, my memory is, let's get the kids in, let's have some nice meals, let's have a bit of a party, let's raise loads of money. Where does that money go? I mean, how effective is that money? Because it doesn't seem like for decades we've been raising money for the youth, and the youth have fallen away, hemorrhaging away from the church. What's happened to that money? Like, at the very least, it's being put into the wrong things, as you said. One of the things we might talk about, whether today or at a later time with Gavin as well, is that I was watching a programme with Alex O'Connor, the atheist YouTuber who speaks to a lot of Catholics, a lot of Christians, and he was speaking recently to Father Gregory Pine. It is Father Gregory Pine, isn't it? Who's on Pints with Aquinas. Yeah, he was very calm, very measured, patient man, and lovely in his responses. But at one point he said something, and then he said, "I might be wrong, I'm not." And Alex O'Connor picked him up, and I thought quite rightly, and said, I get this a lot when I talk to Christians. They talk to me and they say, this is what I believe, but I might be wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying, because there's this desperate attempt to be nice. I don't want to offend you. And Alex O'Connor, who was the atheist, quite rightly said, there comes a point where you have to say you're wrong. And this is right. This is true. And so I think part of the problem is exactly that. And it's on the Feast of Christ the King, we might want to bear this in mind, is as long as we're unable to say, this is true. If this is true, that can't be true. Islam can't be true. Judaism who reject the Messiah can't be true. Atheism can't be true. Paganism can't be true. Unless we're prepared to say that, we get nowhere. It's just endless dialogue.
Well, yeah, and I think exactly as you said. I wonder how much. I wouldn't be too hard on Father Gregory, because I think you could say that's an
No, he was great.
affectation. Yeah,
He was
no,
great.
like you have to wonder to what extent is that an affectation, because if we're coming from a place of charity, we always do try our best to be as kind and as sympathetic. And one of the ways that we move forward in any kind of dialogue is to have sort of empathy, isn't it? So rather than be confrontational, you're saying, well, yeah, I completely understand what you're saying, but, have you thought about it this way? That's just a way of speaking in lots of senses. But,
But has that
you're
gone too far?
absolutely, well, this is it. You're absolutely right. And I wonder if that's what it is, that this is learned from a Christian culture, this openness to and charity in all things charity, to the extent where even when someone is trying to cut your head off with a sword,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I'm terribly sorry. Well, it's a very English thing anyway, isn't it? If nothing else. But I would say, I think that I've often thought that, Katherine, with regards to like ideologies that are poisonous or problematic, but it is difficult because you want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And I mean, Islam is a particularly pernicious example, where if you've studied Islam to any sort of extent, you have to come to the point where you recognize the fact that it is incompatible with liberal Western democracy. And I mean liberal in the classical sense, not in the progressive sense. But there is a problem there, where you go so far in Islam that that ultimately it says you either convert or we kill you. That's fundamentally what it says that's what the Quran teaches is the zenith of Islam, that when the Mahdi comes, we'll all be Muslims. So, you either have to push back against that and say why it isn't true. And, I think, and if you've engaged with the Quran at all, you can see that that there are some serious gaps in the theology there.
And
So it's not,
Catholics have to be courageous enough to do that, because the
yeah,
implications of not doing it are saying, well, hang on, are we prepared to accept that Muhammad is the final prophet, that Christ didn't suffer and die for us, to deny the incarnation? These are not small things. We cannot compromise with any of that. And Judaism too. For Judaism say, yes, we have this Old Testament which we share in common, but the absolutely crucial point of the incarnation is rejected by the Jews. That has to be something that this is, again, Christ the King, that we have to say, look, this is a point of departure that is too big for us to ignore.
it's completely radical, isn't it? As Saint Irenaeus, said that the incarnation is the essential point, really. And as you say, both Islam and Judaism, God is utterly transcendent, and in Christianity, God is utterly immanent, to the point where he, is present on our altars and in our tabernacles. It couldn't be further removed. When if you think about it in those terms, although there are things that we share, and we have a habit, we're habitually focused on what we share, which is like, I can see why we do that. But as you say, there comes a point where you either have to capitulate or you have to stand in your truth.
Yeah.
And the problem, I think, I'd be interested in what you think. We've lost the confidence, haven't we? Our bishops have lost the confidence. You wonder, do they believe that this is the truth? That in the power of the gospel, the radical change in power of the gospel. And part of what I was saying at the beginning there was that people desperately need this healing power. And if we dumb it down, or if we fail to preach it, then we're, as you said, we're allowing them to perish, which is a terrible sin.
Yeah. And you say there's lots we share, and that's true, but it's at that point of departure that is crucial. It's like saying men and women, there's a lot we share. There's a lot you and I share, Mark, but at the point of difference, that's the crucial thing, that if we eradicate and we say, actually, we are so similar that we can just meld into one thing. You know, okay, you've got these few bits that we can adjust with medical science, and I've got a few physical bits that we can knock off, and it makes no difference because let's focus on our similarities and not our differences. You absolutely can't do that, because you destroy the givenness of sex, which we see in the whole trans movement. So yes, male and female share much in common. Human and animal share much in common, but it's at those points of departure that our identity is crucial. And so, looking at our identity as children of God, it's at that point of the incarnation of realizing that we are created by God, and God gave His only Son so to take on humanity, to suffer and die, to give us eternal life. That is key. To say, I believe all of this in common with you, but not that.
And when we obfuscate that difference, that
exactly,
removes the meaning, doesn't it? And the beauty and the power, and you know, the thing that, and that's what I see it all the time. Like in my community, like one of my sons was away in Amsterdam for work last week, with a group of guys, and their behaviour was absolutely, like, all right, it's probably what most guys are get up to.
I'm getting a bit worried now.
Well, but I mean, unfortunately, that's the truth, and it was shocking to hear it. You know, my wife was shocked. I mean, I don't know. He wasn't particularly explicit, but sort of in the context that these guys are broken. You know, they're broken guys. Yeah. They're really struggling, and to juxtapose that with the guys who were at Catholic Man UK, who were committed to their families, committed to developing virtue. They knew where they were going. That is the power of the gospel. That's what it does for you. It gives these young men confidence to have children, to raise families. And when we dumb it down, when not us, not me and you and Gavin, when the church dumbs it down, when our bishops, when our hierarch, when our priests try to water it down, they're taking away that confidence. And, one of the things I said at the conference last weekend was, how dare you take that away from us when we have put our children's lives on the line? This is how important it is for Catholic men and Catholic women. We desperately need the church to at least believe in what it's supposed to believe in. Like, that's all we're asking for. It's not a lot, really, when you think about it, is it?
I loved it when you said that. Like, how dare you? Because there's that real fire for truth and love. That's where it comes from. It comes from this absolute awareness that these children have been gifted to you to return them to God in heaven, and you need to have the bishops, you need the church to help support you in that. And when you feel let down, I mean, it's a terrible, terrible crime. It's a terrible sin. Better a millstone is put around someone's neck and they drown than to do this, to lead our young people astray. This is why we get so apoplectic about Catholic schools. It's because we're not saying leave it only to Catholic schools, but at least in union with the parish, the school and the home, there should be that completely shared understanding that these children are gifts and that they've been created to be saints, and that we never lose sight of that purpose. And instead, we have our Catholic schools signing up to diversity clubs and, all these things. I know some really, really good Catholic schools with some really good teachers who are just this week talking about setting up a diversity club. And it's like, but again, why are we reaching for these things that are outside of our understanding of ourselves as, the right anthropology as being created by God? Because these clubs, what they do is they focus on our differences. They focus on solutions outside of Christ, outside of the church, and they inevitably create division, the very thing that they say they're against. And again, it's that utopianism. It's like, well, how can we solve all the problems? Tell you what, have daily mass, encourage the kids to go, offer confession, get on with teaching maths, and leave the rest to God. You're not going to solve this problem by setting up a club.
But don't you think that sort of thing comes from the fact that we've stopped addressing these? Whose responsibility is it in the church to address these issues? We've got all the teaching is there. Do you remember me saying to you that when I first started studying theology formally, I was blown away? The first lecture was on the Trinity, and it absolutely blew me away. And
Yeah.
part of me was really angry that I hadn't heard any of this stuff before. I didn't know any, I thought I did. I was confident that I understood what the Trinity was, but I had absolutely no idea when it came down to when I was confronted with the power and the beauty of the church's teaching. And that's all I'm saying is that, like, because we're not giving this teaching, it's no wonder that our youth are going looking for it elsewhere. But what is surprising is that when we've got a culture that doesn't, within the church, that doesn't emphasize that parents are the first educators, it should, but it doesn't teach that. Instead, we've been developing this culture that says, oh, look, we've got Catholic schools. You don't have to teach your kids the faith anymore. You can opt out and we'll do it all for you in school. We'll do the sacramental
Really badly.
work. Yeah. And as it turns out, at this stage now, we all can, we'll have a look at the experiment and see that it hasn't worked out at all. But
Yeah.
like to your point, make your mind up. What are you doing? Are we doing it in school or are we doing it at home? But the bishops have got a responsibility to inform us, they're the ones who should be promulgating these discussions and these arguments. Forget about the unbelievable navel gazing of the Synod on synodality and look at the
Yeah.
crisis in our culture and address
Yeah.
that. We have got all the answers within the church
Yeah.
and they are beautiful and powerful. You don't have to take my
And
word for it.
true.
Come to Catholic Man UK and see the young men in their 20s with 3 kids who are doctors and, holding down really good jobs, teachers, fighting the system, putting everything on the line for Jesus and for the gospel. That is so powerful and moving. And
With a huge queue for confession.
and yeah, I mean, this is thanks be to God, and I do think, as we keep saying that who's going to save the church is not the bishops or the priests, but come on,
Yeah.
bishops and priests, if you got behind us a little bit, it wouldn't half make a difference. And you've got. I know it's hard. I know it's hard to talk about human sexuality, marriage, end of life, abortion. I know these things are difficult. Find a way. Find a way to address it. You can address it in a positive way about why these things are positive and important. If you come on the March for Life, you see it's all beautiful. There's a wide range of ages there, and it's exciting and interesting and very positive vibe. So we can do these things. We can celebrate life. We can celebrate the family. We can celebrate our faith. It doesn't have to be judgmental and shouting. And what we have to remember that we've got the medicine, we've got the medicine for the sinful world that we live in. And what we're trying to do is share that with everyone. And if we remember that a little bit more on the Feast of Christ the King, I think it would be a really powerful mix to speak to the culture.
Absolutely. There's something especially powerful about seeing, as I got a little window into this, being the only woman invited to Catholic Man UK
Yeah.
ever, and probably ever again. It was actually, there's something incredibly powerful about seeing men, especially seeing men who, in all humility, kneeling before our Lord, going to confession, praying to Our Lady, asking for strength, but having the courage and the strength that this culture needs to stand up for life. There were people there who work in pro-life causes. There are people in all fields standing up for life, standing up for a culture of life, living it, preaching it and living it in their daily lives, whatever the cost. These are strong men. These are the men our culture needs. And I thought that was wonderful. And one of the other things that we, just to briefly finish, one of the other things we spoke about and recognised at Catholic Man UK was the number of young men, especially, who are being drawn to Islam because they believe that it demands something of them, because they're hungry, because they're born, they're created by God, different to woman, and they feel wrongly that Islam calls something from them that taps into their masculinity. But in fact, that's another way in which we've utterly let young people down, talking of Youth Sunday, and especially, you might say, young men, is that we haven't shown them what their faith really is, who Christ really is, who Christ calls them to be. And because of that, they're either being sucked into the atheism and the secularism, the video games and the porn that Pope Pius XI instituted this feast
Push
against, to
Mm.
push against, or they're being drawn and radicalized into something like Islam, which is a lie, which is false, which will not direct them to heaven. And so for the souls of our children, our bishops have to think that is love. That is how I can love. That is true charity. That is, as you've got behind you on your sign, caritas in veritate. So more so than the sort of gentle, nice way in which they are speaking about certain social justice issues in the culture now.
It's just pointless. But surely we can see that now, that it's not getting us anywhere. They're so frightened about upsetting anyone. You know, oh, we mustn't upset so and so. Like, forget about that. Let's just do what we've all what's always worked. If you want to know what works, if you want to bring, this is the point really. All around the world, we see what young people want, and it's not what the youth service gives them. It's not going, oh well, don't worry about that, just come along and have a nice time and a pizza and everything will be all right. And then they never come to mass, you know, like they go. It's just absolute craziness. We need to explain why it's important to live your life as a Catholic, and why it's powerful and why it can change the world, you know. So step it up, guys.
Yeah, well, a good note to end on this. Christ the King, Viva Cristo Rey, and we'll
Say a prayer
continue
for Gavin, everyone, as well, because he's stuck in the floods. He would be with us otherwise.
Poor Gavin
has been sending us videos of him in boats and.
Poor Gavin. Gavin, if you're watching, our prayers are with you, and we hope you arrive home safely. He's been carted off by firemen in floods up on the Welsh marches, so he's had a difficult week, what with his cataract operation and all sorts. So prayers for Gavin, and hopefully he'll be back with us before long for another Catholic Unscripted.
Got tickets are out now for our next retreat, and the retreats have been growing in popularity, haven't they? The last one was sold out quite quickly. And Stonyhurst is a wonderful venue. We've had people come to the first retreat who came back for the second retreat. It's going to be all new material in the next retreat. We're going to be looking at different things, perhaps a focus on the saints a little bit more and a bit of catechesis. And Stonyhurst is wonderful. The food's wonderful. The accommodation is absolutely beautiful. It's all en suite. So grab a ticket on the Catholic Unscripted website.
Yeah, actually, grab a ticket, watch our video inviting you to Stonyhurst, and then email info@catholicunscripted.com. There's a phone number to call as well, which I've forgotten, but it's on the video to invite you to Stonyhurst. There are a few tickets left. We've sold over half the tickets. There are a few left. It's in January, so if you can come, the ticket price does include 2 nights accommodation, all your meals, and they're really good meals, beautiful accommodation, social time, the conference, access to the talks afterwards, and it's really good value for money. And I know the people who have come before would say the same thing. So grab a ticket while you can. If you absolutely can't come, perhaps you live in another country and it's just not feasible, you can pick up a link for £25, which will give you both access live during the conference to join in, listen live, ask your questions live, and then also a recording of all those talks to keep and refer back to as well via a link that we'll send you once you pick up that online ticket. So that's our news. Thank you to all of you who've picked up a membership, who are supporting us in any way that you can. It's hugely appreciated, hugely necessary, and means that we can continue to do this work. So thank you. But for now, I'm Katherine Bennett. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Mark Lambert. Christus Regnat.